and we're returning for our last session of the Black History Month series. So we appreciate you being here on time. We have an excellent speaker. I can't wait to hear from her. And we're going to go ahead and start the session as we normally do by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also want to acknowledge our ancestors and all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stewards whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest today, Ms. Liza Arnason. She has a BA and master's. She's the founder and chair of Ase Community Foundation for Black Canadians with Disabilities. She's also the owner of Arnason Consulting, the founder and chair of the UCalgary Black Alumni Network. She is a University of Toronto alumni from Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. And above all else, she's a mother, a grandmother, and a mentor. She's committed to the principles of nothing without us and for us by us, has always been the cornerstone of her work as an educator, an administrator, and community advocate. Her depth of knowledge and expertise is informed by her lived experiences, her research, her policy initiatives, her passion for equity. And she's been an inspiration for the past 30 years. That's how long her career has spanned. So we really appreciate her excellence in sharing with us today. Liza draws on critical work, including Black feminism, disability justice, critical race theories to inform community-based research, as well as policy change initiatives. She is unapologetically brings her lived experience to those intersectional experiences of race, gender, and disability. That's what she's able to bring to the table. She's able to identify nuances and gaps, the disparities that lie within the systems and structures, and provide research. Through the collective leadership and wisdom across Canada, she continues to design and advocate for new models and systems that will affect real change. So she has an outstanding bio. I really can't do any justice. So I would love for you to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about the work that you do.
Thank you, Blessed. This is quite the introduction, and I very much appreciate it. So where do you go from there? Because I always start with the basics. I am a Black disabled woman. I have been for decades. I did not disclose my disability till I was 47 years old and hid it very well until I couldn't hide it anymore. And at that time, the accommodation process, when it is intersected with race and gender and anti-Black racism, did not leave space for me to be accommodated. So I'm on a different journey in my life right now. I'm on leave from that employer and on disability, something that took me a year of depression to get through, knowing that loss of that person that I was, that you read, and wondering who is that person now. And I'm here to say God has your purpose. And I believe in and leading through the spirits of ancestors that have carried me and my families in Jamaica through hundreds of years of torture and celebration, and as well as God and the lifting up that he's done for me in my trials. I'm a grandma. Yes, I am. I'm a mother of 3 daughters, all adult, one's adulting. And I have worked and taken opportunities throughout my life when either somebody didn't want to do it or no one saw an opening to get their foot in the door to do it, or it just landed on my lap and I took risks, leaving full-time permanent jobs as a single mom to do a contract job. We take risks, and we take risks based on our values and our beliefs. So everything that you're going to hear from me today has been woven into who I am as a person by my Jamaican mother. And I live by those values and those beliefs. I'm very grateful for that legacy that I carry. And I use that in the work that I do. And that work that I do was already mentioned. It's along with being on leave from the University of Toronto in my former role of Assistant Dean of Students International Community, I also on leave from teaching at Ontario Tech. But in the meantime, I decided there was a gap and talked to other Black women in that age group of wondering what's next when you can't hide the disability anymore, or Black men that know that it will interfere with their progress in their lives if they tell people. We came up with an idea of starting an organization, and I would say it's between myself and another person named Janelle Anderson. And we came up with that we're going to do it. And I thought about it, and anybody who knows who I am, if I say I'm going to do it, I do it. Hence, one day sitting on the couch, I was trying to figure out what the name would be. The name that we use is Ase. Any Yoruba people here will know Ase is so you say, so it will be. So the Ase Community Foundation for Black Canadians with Disabilities is we say, and so it will be. We have the essence and the ability to manifest what we want into existence. We want liberation for all Black people, and that includes Black people with disabilities. That's who I am.
We love that. Thank you so much. And just your introduction, you're already an inspiration to many who are here. I see them nodding and giving applause. Can you go ahead and tell us what inspires you most in doing the work that you do?
Somebody asked me that question earlier in the month, and I had to think about it because I've always been like this. So let me take you through a journey. The journey is a darker-skinned Jamaican mom in Calgary, Alberta, came to Canada as a domestic, and many of you may or not know, but that's how Black women were allowed in this country. And she put me in school with my sister, you know, and again, they like to put your kids close together, even if you're not supposed to be in that grade. One more kid out of the house. She took me to class. She took me to the school, registered me. My name is Liza Ann. They told my mom it was Liza. You mean Liza, L-I-Z-A. My mom goes, it's Liza, from her thick St. Thomas, Moortown, maroon Jamaican accent. And they said, my mom said, no, it's Liza. And they said, you mean Lisa. They took the S, they took the Z, they changed it to an S. I changed it back in grade 12. My whole identity shifted because at that moment, they placed me in English as a second language. I was born in Calgary, Alberta. And that's where I stayed. I stayed there till high school starts in Alberta. And at that point, that I had met my first Black teacher. I've had two in my entire life. And that Black teacher was Mr. Gale from Jamaica. No nonsense man. And when they came with their clipboard and called for my name, new school, new people, new everything, my goosebumps go up on my arms every time I tell the story. Shame, embarrassment. And he looks at the man with his stupid clipboard and he says, I'm the English instructor. I'll let you know if she needs help with her English. And he shut the door. The first time somebody stood up for me. After he said, and when you're done after school, you come back and see me. He came back and see me. I went and he said, I want you to read. I read. He goes, I want you to read what you see. Any Jamaicans in here who are responsible for the messing up my language? But I wasn't saying a word the way he said they want to hear them. So what did he say? So he said, read the words. I said, it's hospital. No, he said, it's hospital. There's an H. Say it. You can't ask somebody a question. You have to ask them a question. From that point, I knew I was the best student everywhere I went. In English too. But I was so afraid of speaking, so afraid of anything in the languages. I was pure sciences. I went to I went to pre-med at the University of Calgary at 17. And the only reason I went is Alberta had an automatic scholarship for everybody over a certain grade. And it came to my house. I didn't know what it was. I went to the school and I asked, and they said, you can go anywhere you want. Where do you want to go? I didn't even know what university was. So my lesson is, in Alberta, I never felt I belonged. Being light-skinned, Icelandic background as well on my father's side, I never felt I belonged. My siblings, we were not invited to the white kids' parties. There weren't any Black people. Where does that place a person? And you know, if you come through that transatlantic slave process, as a people, you carry intergenerational trauma, but you carry the strength of those ancestors that were mentioned earlier before Blessed. That's my inspiration. If my ancestors, if my mother can come from a small place near where West Hall is from and come here to white people's backsides and get spit in her face and call the N-word so we could eat, I can show myself up for the next person. So I put myself in spaces, I put myself in places, I allow my color to get me in some of those spaces. I know my privilege, I know where I'm not privileged, and I use that as my inspiration to say, is somebody stepped in for me, I will always step in for the next person. And if I've done my life the way I want to, I will teach, coach, and sponsor people so they can step in to other people. That's what inspires me.
Thank you for sharing that. And as you share it, like I said, it's an inspiration to us at the same time. And we want to know if you could share, why do you think the work that Ase Community Foundation for Black Canadians with Disabilities is so critical to the entire Black community?
Well, one of the things that we've known over time in the Black community, we don't talk about disability, which means we don't accommodate disability, which means we are still buying into the colonizer's view of what is valued in a body and a body of work. So they value a certain type of work, and the only way they put value on Black bodies or women's bodies was the amount of work you could produce. So if we're going to move forward with the full liberation of Black people, we have to have a true conversation about how we see ourselves. You can't fight for the right and the privilege to be Black and equitable across the board and leave others behind, including your people in your family. That almost everybody on this call knows one person where, if you're Jamaican, you have your own words, right? You know one person. And if you don't, you will be that person because you'll age. So the question is do we want to build and take all that talent? We know Black people, I don't like the word resilience, by the way, but we know we are strong and we make it happen, right? But you know what comes with people with disabilities? Even more tenaciousness, even more warrior spirit, because in our communities in the Caribbean, nobody's sitting there helping you. You're supposed to get up and work and do things. You're just not supposed to act like you're different. Once we get what everybody else in this country has, free accommodations. Accommodations are not, it's the same thing as people said, you can't help Black people get jobs because not fair. It's the same thing with persons with disabilities. But based on the committees and the federal government committees I sit on, who do not want to do race-based data, de-aggregated data, we are the lowest. We don't get any of the free stuff. Imagine if your child was diagnosed in school, whether you liked it or not, that child would be eligible for a tax credit for you and for them later in life. That child gets a registered savings plan. Did you know that? An automatic up to $3,500 and another $5 goes in every year till they're 49. We don't take advantage of any of it. Nothing. And we're going to build our communities and our supports with everybody in that community. That's why we have to do it together. I see the questions, and I'm telling you, you know, you kind of watch, sometimes you're on the phone and you mute your TV and you let the captions read. Those were not put in so you could be on your FaceTime or whatever. They're put in years ago to help people who can't hear. But now people get them for everything. Well, that's what all accessibility technology does. It's not just for that person. If we can build it into our communities as a normal thing, into our businesses, we're not only going to support all of the Black people, we are going to actually get that population of persons with disabilities, which is the largest minority group in Canada. You're going to get that business, that community, those monies, those resources. You get a $4,000 grant every semester if you're a student, for free if you have disabilities. You can get an extra 4 semester. There's so much money. And one of the things about Ase is everything's in my head, or everything's in that other sister's head, or the brother, or their head. And we needed a place that we could talk and put it together. So we ran a town hall and people cried and said it was the first place they'd ever been in a space with other people who could talk about Blackness and having a disability. That's what really framed the work that we do.
I really appreciate the space that you've created for that kind of dialogue. Why the name Liberation for Black Canadians with Disabilities?
Well, liberation, it's collective liberation of Black peoples in our mission. And so it's not just for persons with disabilities. The unfortunate part about it is we have to still be separate and on the margins, because within the disability movement, I will call out names if you ask me, we are not included in the space and actually deliberately excluded, to the point that even on an international day for the Day of Persons with Disabilities in Ottawa, where Trudeau, the minister, the deputy ministers, senators, other ministers were there, the disability main organizations told me, no, your name's not on the list, you can't come to our coalition. 2, then the person from the government's like, why? What? I think she should be there and I'm paying. They're like, oh, well, there's not enough room in the space. Then I won't go. They said, no, she has to be on the list. Then he comes back, then another person, they come back because I'm pressing. And they're saying, oh, it's a fire code violation. So then another strong woman, the CEO from Rick Hansen, who has been good allies with us, has said, you know what? Then I'm not going, she's going. So somebody whispered and took my card and gave me the address and the room number. And what would a Black woman do? Show up. I showed up in a space that I was told over and over again in front of very important people not to go. I wasn't welcome. I showed up, and then I was told I'm not welcome. And then I stayed. And then I did my mini TED Talk, which is why I'm thinking I was asked to do this, because I can start and I can talk. So all that about me and English as a second language was all crap. They didn't like how I spoke. I speak fine. And so that's it. So that's what happened. I went anyways. Then I was sick with and it's a trigger to my chronic illness and my post-traumatic stress. And I was sick for 2 weeks. Hence the reason I'm on leave. It is traumatic, as we all know, as warriors trying to get liberation for our community, ourselves, our families, our future grandchildren. And it wears on you. But I'm the one most comfortable speaking up about it because I'm in my 50s. You know, I'm not trying to build my career, and I don't really care anymore. I didn't care much before, that was the problem. But now I really don't care. So I have what's called the collateral to speak up, because who's going to tell me I can't? And that book is coming out as well. Hopefully I finish it in Jamaica next month when I go. The book I'm coming out with is about building your collateral, your VEX money, and how to build your career by knowing when to talk, when not to talk. That lesson I never learned when I was a child. So that's why we're doing this, because they don't want us in their space. And unfortunately, the Black community hasn't want to talk about us in their space either. So we have to bring these issues up. We have to be honest and open. And there is no other community I know where I can be as honest and open than in my own community. We know we talk a lot and we always talk the truth. And that's why I want to do this within the community, because we're going to need the strength as we keep moving to eradicate all that we've lived in for hundreds of years.
Oh, we appreciate that you are taking up the space, regardless of if you're invited or welcome. And you spoke on a little bit about stepping up as a warrior. What warrior stories have shaped the Black disabled warriors that you're aware of?
Well, without mentioning names, when we met with the chief, the brand new position, Chief Accessibility Officer of Canada, she reports to Minister Carla Quattro, who's also very supportive of the work that we do. We started our presentation to her, unlike how other people start. You know, they talk about their organization, they talk about what they need from the government. We did an education thing on what anti-Black racism was. Then we went into what Black feminism is and what the complexity of being Black, disabled, maybe being queer, being trans, and what that looks like at those intersections. Then we moved on to explain disability justice and the principles behind that fact that we must do this collectively. It must be done by the most impacted. That's the for us, by us. So we went through that whole scenario explaining that, educating, because one of the things we keep forgetting is they actually don't know. They actually don't know. They know what ableism is. They do not know what anti-Black racism is. And it's not just racism against Black people. And people get confused. Anti-Black racism is a racism that they built the structures to enslave people. It's the structures that colonized and imperialized and divided Africa. Right? These are the structures. This is not just about the color. This is about what they think of us. And imagine if you're disabled, what they think of you if you're Black. You're worthless. And unfortunately, in the community, there's a lot of Black people that believe that. And that's what makes Black, not that alone, and all the discrimination and all the lack of resources, because we don't want to say we need help, because we don't want the shame. And if you do go to get help, by the way, they're not giving it to you. They're not going to get what the other kids are getting. You're not going to get that accommodation the way you have the right to have it. You're not going to get all those benefits from the government I mentioned, because your doctor's not going to sign the paperwork. That's what's happened. And we don't, 50%, I understand it, one survey was Black women do not have family doctors. Well, if everything is based on a medical report, how are we ever getting proper medical treatment? How are we ever going to get where we're at if we have zero control over any of these systems? And the only way it changes at the age of 53 is if we stop pretending that the surface stuff works and we dig deep into the nuances, the most uncomfortable things that makes a warrior work. Uncomfortable is you're immigrating from another country, your sister gets in, you don't, because you are born with a birth defect. So only way to come into the country is to remove the leg that the birth defect was on. So you come into this country, one leg less, so you could immigrate. That's a story we told to the Chief Accessibility Officer. Or the story about always being left out. How about the story of, I had a nervous breakdown because they didn't believe me. I'm a sexual violence survivor. They didn't believe me because I don't perform that way. I'm a top performer. How many Black women can say the same? They give you another dump, you take it. They give you more, you take it. And the more you do, the more they give. We're not allowed it in our families to be weak. We're not allowed in the Black community to be weak. We're not allowed definitely in a white society to be weak. Nobody in the world sees Black women as people who should be weak. And we have bought into that. And that on top of not being believed and not getting accommodated and being exhausted and feeling, holy crap, I had a nervous breakdown. And, you know, I think, I don't even know if I even told Victor. I didn't talk to, nobody could find me. Nobody could see me. Because if you have a disability, you are doing double time. Plus, you're in the corners rooting for people, helping people who don't want to tell anybody else that they have a disability. You're hiding a part of who you are. And by the way, if any of you have read Malcolm Gladwell, he writes a story called The Erasure of Our Vulnerability. Absolutely, Juliet. If anybody has ever read Malcolm Gladwell, there's a book called Outliers. Malcolm Gladwell's grandmother was Jamaican and lighter than me and could pass when they moved to Canada. And he writes about that and the change of life because of that choice, or the life in Jamaica because of the color. And really what it is sometimes you see things, we have been told that Black is a deficit. And we tell ourselves in the Black community, we're Black, we're proud. But some of the actions we do when we treat people with disabilities as a deficit, that's the same thing that white people see Black people as. When you are able to overcome, bring other people to where they need to be, survive every day, every year, every month, every decade, then you are absolutely a warrior. And those are the hidden talents and the skills of Black people that nobody seems to understand. Those are the hidden talents of Black people with disabilities. I did a panel for the Conference Board of Canada, major work conference. That was trouble in itself, but they sorted it out once I said I wasn't coming if they didn't fix what I didn't like. Because again, I don't have to. And you know what? One of the questions was asked to me, you know, because they always have these recruitments to bring in people of color. What do you, I'm not quite sure what to do. So we have a great Black candidate, but how do we approach the manager without, you know, telling him that the person's Black? I said, excuse me, why can't you say the person's Black? This is on a major conference. And I'm the panelist. I'm like, what, Black is a deficit? I said, Black people are proud to be Black. That's fine, we're good. You don't think we should be proud to be Black. You don't think that the experiences of Black people are talents. Those are talents. That's the warrior. That's the liberation. And that's what they're afraid of. And I'm telling you, Black people with disabilities, and there's people on this call right now, there's some of you thinking in the back of your head, well, I have diabetes, that's not a disability. Yes, it is. You have rheumatism, I have rheumatism. You have lupus. You know, you have ADHD, you have a learning disability, you have anxiety. These are disabilities the government gives money for. The government gives you a disability tax credit, cuts down all kinds of things in your taxes. Like, we are not the ones getting anything because we also carry that shame. We carry that shame through colonialism. And we have to shed it. We have to liberate it. I'm a bit of a decolonizer. I've been this way since I wrote my thesis over 20-something years ago. I was surprised UofT hired me after they read it. But hey, I read it a long time ago. I wrote it a long time ago before it was a thing. And I continue to live my life that way. We have to liberate everybody who's Black, everybody, every trans person that's murdered is your kin. And if we don't do it, we are not being liberated as a community. And that's why the Ase Community Foundation is so important, because we're not running programs. We are researchers, policy writers. We run events, awareness, and education. We do lots of partnerships. I'm happy to come to anybody's organization, or anybody on the team would come and talk, would come and help you audit your stuff. I have a business. If you want to hire me as a business, I give you a different rate, and then I can go get another contract and charge them the right amount or more. And you're going to see that Ase is also looking forward to the social enterprise kind of model, where we're taking our skills and abilities and opening ourselves up to the accessibility community where all the money is. If you had a skill and you know how to work with people with disabilities, how many personal support workers are in our community? How many nurses, doctors? We have a whole community of talent and compassionate people. Why not we get certification and be the accessibility accommodators? Make your $150,000. We shouldn't shy from we shouldn't shy from it, because this is another area of the Black community. There's wealth to be made. If that's wealth. I was on welfare, in case people want to know what my story is. I was a single mom. I lived in social housing. And here I am in Ajax in my own home on long-term disability, doing whatever the hell I want. God, it is. You do what you want. You run with your values. You never leave anybody behind. Ever. And how many times has your mommy told you that? Leaving your brother or your sister behind, right? Never leave anybody behind. We learned it, we know it. And then for some reason, as we grow and we live within a colonized system, we forget. Don't leave Black people with disabilities behind. They're not a deficit.
But we thank you for taking that mantle up and making sure that we don't leave anyone behind. As you said, if we're liberating Black people, it includes Black people with disabilities. So who are the key stakeholders in the Black Canadians with disabilities that we should be aware of?
Oh, the number one, it's led by and for Black people with disabilities. So our own mandate is 2/3 of the board has to be Black with disabilities. So our whole board is Black. The majority actually is persons with disabilities. All our staff have disabilities and are Black. We hire summer students, research assistants, and other people that are primarily Black with disabilities, but we do hire other people who have disabilities that are not Black or racialized. Because again, we did a capacity building research project looking at organizations across Canada that were Black or racialized and did work somewhat at the intersection of disability, even if they didn't use the word. Because again, Black community is not the only one that doesn't talk about disability. But when we did our research, there it was. All of these warriors doing this work while working their full-time job, raising their families, building his career, whatever's going on in everybody's lives, and they still do it. So,
thank you for that. Now, I know before the pandemic, the Black community already experienced a lot of disparities within healthcare treatment. How did COVID-19 expose those inequities for the both people with disabilities and the Black community as a whole?
Well, it's Black people here right now. So we know that it had the highest disproportionate rate of people who got COVID, long-term COVID, and death in Canada. And we're not going to get into the vaccination thing because we'll be split. I'm a person who is immune compromised. I am boosted up to 4 boosters. I didn't see my grandson for a year because part of his family didn't want to be vaccinated. So I couldn't see my grandson. And that is sad to me. Once again, don't leave people behind. And COVID is going to have long-term disability effects on our community who didn't have disabilities in the first place. Number two, it's going to have people who had pre-existing conditions, maybe weren't taking your medication, didn't think it was during COVID when you couldn't see a doctor and you couldn't get that medication and you couldn't go to treatment and you couldn't do this and you couldn't see your psychologist, you couldn't see your counselor, you couldn't see a nutritionist. The health of Black people declined and nobody is talking about it. They talk about COVID, they talk about numbers, they talk about mental health. They're not talking that internally not only has our bodies already been beaten down with everything that we've already spoken about, COVID and the absence of treatment, even at a greater rate than how we didn't get treatment or support in the first place. Now, if you have a pre-existing, I had a pre-existing, I couldn't see any counselor. I give myself my needles. I couldn't do my needle in my back. Like there's so many things. So the level of pain you live with, your mobility changes. It's probably why I'm still on leave, because I couldn't do anything to help myself. Then you've got older people aging in the Black community. They have pre-existing disabilities, but apparently when somebody turns 70 or 65, no one talks about those disabilities anymore. Now they're just old. There are disabilities and they need accommodations. And again, somewhere in the community, Black seniors don't need it. And this COVID just brought it out. It also brought out something. People said, well, now people with disabilities can work from home. People with mobility disabilities, it worked. People with all the other disabilities, any of this invisible, I have chronic illness, or maybe you have different types of learning disabilities, you're a diverse learner, you need to see people to see what's going on. That was gone. Those kids in school will be suffering. The other thing we know, by the way, and it's even worse now, Black kids don't usually get proper assessment in the school system. They get told what their diagnosis is by people that should not be making diagnoses. So guess what happened during COVID? They got nothing. And then now they go back to school and they're behind and their diagnosis is something along the lines of not related. And even if your child gets a diagnosis, did you know they're supposed to accommodate them? They don't. So now under COVID, we have a greater concern over our health, my health, and those of others who have chronic illnesses and couldn't do some of the treatments. Our health has suffered. I was afraid of getting COVID because I would definitely be in the ICU. My respiratory specialist called me every 6 weeks and told me all the dead bodies. He's never seen so many people dying in his entire career, and he's a special surgeon on Coxwell. Like it was serious for me enough that I didn't go anywhere. The second year I went out after 2 years. It's sad, it's depressing. And that doesn't go away. Click, I can go out now, I'm not depressed. And so I see all the medical associations. I see all the doctors, and I have to encourage every Black person on here and every person you know, pay attention to them, follow them, join their events, go to a doctor you're comfortable with, please, and tell them the truth about how you feel, what isn't working, what is working. And by the way, one of the things Ase Community will be doing, and was supported through the Supporting Black Initiative Fund, Tropicana, is we have a Black Accessibility Knowledge Hub launching. It was supposed to in March, but I'm going to Jamaica, so it's marching in April. And it's going to house a culturally relevant service directory. So it'll be free for people to submit. So if you're a psychologist, if you're a nutritionist, if you're a tutor, you can put your resource there. You have to be Black focused, and you have to have an understanding of disability. And then we also have a disability resource. So all those things that I spoke about earlier will be there. And then we're going to have, it's also going to be a knowledge catalog, searchable. So if you're looking for some of the things I've said, or you've heard somebody say something, you know, you're looking for things, you're like, oh, I want to look that up. If it's got anything to do with the intersection of race, gender, and disability, it's going to be housed there. People can submit, people can retrieve. And we're very proud of the work. We hired Ara Abraham, which is partially deaf Black woman with her own business. And she will be hosting the event and walking people through it. And we're very excited. And how do a bunch of people with disabilities pull this off with no money? Because of the amount ingenuity that Black people have. You can give us 10 million and you can give us $10. But if we say we're going to do that, we're going to do it. 10 million makes us not, have nervous breakdowns. Did I answer that question?
You most definitely did.
Okay.
And I just wanted to hone in a little bit more to know if you could share some examples of collaborations that address some of these issues across various levels of government, academic institutions, and as well as the foundations. Any specific examples?
No. Before Ase existed, there wasn't disability and Blackness. We knew it was there. We found organizations in Vancouver and others that are doing work, but there wasn't a national approach to go into the minister's office and say, you have a call for accessibility funding. We've applied 3 years in a row and got nothing. Okay. Then we apply to another grant, and it's a Black grant. And then we're told, no, because it's not about disability. And this is what's happened. This is what happened to us. It was terrible. It was a terrible ride. The organization that supported me, and many of you know of Taibu and Liban. I know him from before, long time, I'm at UofT Scarborough. And I went to him with the idea, and I said, listen, there's a gap. Yes, there's a gap, because nowhere in the health centers do they talk about how do you get accommodated now that you have lupus? How do you walk into the doctor's office and say, you walk into your boss, you don't have to tell your boss nothing. You only have to tell them your limitations and what you need. Nobody has the right to know your disability. Anyways, so we talked, and he suggested I just stay with it, and he became the trustee and our support. On the other side of the foundation is a foundation called the Counseling Foundation of Canada. If you have never heard of the Counseling Foundation of Canada, and you like to do work where government doesn't want to pay, and they have different themes this year is Indigenous and youth. It's always about career in the research side. They love funding things that government doesn't fund. They're an awesome organization and rich family in Canada. I called out to one of the family members that I met a long time ago when I was at Ryerson, because I also wrote proposals getting $1 million from them. And they love me because I'm honest and straight. Rich people like honest and straight. And I called him, I said, this is what I want. First, I talked to him when I was having my nervous breakdown. I went to the office where the Laidlaw Foundation is. They're all in the same place. And I bawled in front of this rich man. He was kind, he was caring, and he continued to reach out to me. Then when I finally pulled my stuff together, I went back and said, this is what I'm doing. He walked us through exactly what we need to do. And then Rez, who's now going to be the CEO of the Counseling Foundation, because Bruce Lawson is stepping back, he also has been supporting Ase. We've not received any money from them because we're not a charitable organization. But it doesn't mean you can't reach out to people that have that expertise. And then there's a group in under Wilcox in accessibility under the social inclusion unit. And they reached out to us and asked us to do that capacity building research project. And we met with them every 2 weeks. And a lot of people in the Black community goes, oh, I'm with you because they don't trust you, da, da, da. It was the opposite. They coached us through everything that you don't get to know about the process. We educated them. And guess what? You never think things can change so quickly. As we're doing the research project across Canada, the surveys, the focus groups, and all that, we were telling them every 2 weeks what we were finding. They were able to take some of that information even before the final reports were written. And we have an engagement strategy. We don't even call it a call to action. It's if you want to engage with us, this is how you do it. And they changed their criteria for applying for funding for accessibility. And they said 50% of the management and the board has to have disabilities. And the organization has to have an intersectional approach. A lot of organizations scrambled. I can't tell you, but look for us soon, because we've been working very closely to say, we're not just interested in changing things for Black Canadians with disabilities or for Black people. We know that if this is done right, everybody will benefit. Everybody, not just one body. Not everybody wants to be a billionaire. I don't.
This is it. I think the work you do is way more impactful. I'm glad that you know enough to tap into the different resources. As you said, it's not all about getting funding, but knowing their expertise is available to you. So we appreciate your diligence in that. And I really appreciate that you were able to share so many vulnerable stories with us today. So many of our leaders, I know you're not a fan of the word resilience, but they've spoken out. A lot of our leaders here nationally and internationally have raised awareness around rest being a form of resistance. And I just like you to share, like, how do you really balance that and prioritize self-care as it's so important for the work that you do?
Well, one of the influencers of my life when I went to university at the University of Calgary in the 80s, they couldn't believe, was a queer Black woman named Audre Lorde. And this is where you get your resilience, right? And there's nothing more important than self-care. I told you all this story as a warning. If we don't do it, we as the elders and the seniors will not be around to support the next group going through the same thing we did. We have to take this seriously. If you're not your best when you show up for that fight, then you're going to end up with a disability, or you're going to agitate your disability. You're going to be miserable in your house and affect the lives of people around you. So the act of resistance is to stop. That's where you use resistance, is to know when to stop. And the act of resistance is to know no. And sometimes you just look at somebody, you don't have to get into it with them. You just look at them and you say, no, not today. Because today and tomorrow they'll be back. So self-care is definitely is resistance in itself. And if you talk about the ideas of Black joy, we forget that in the Black community. We forget that we're very happy and joyful people. Put on a little music, cook a little food. I think the Nigerian food is called puff puff. Is that right? Oh, I had that yesterday I was in Calgary at the African Studies program luncheon, and because they have to fight to get 2 classes taught there, and they had puff puffs. I ate that before I ate anything, There's my joy. Can you find your joy every day? Sometimes it's sad, it's hard, but you've got to dig and find that joy. You've got to find it. It's there, because every one of us can smile at each other when that other person tells you they're down. What do you do when other people tell you you're down? They're down. It's all right, sister. Come on, it's fine. Let me cook you up something nice, even if you're broken that day. So if you can do that for somebody else, you can do that for yourself. So absolutely taking good care of yourself, getting accommodated if you need it, taking time out, going to Jamaica, in a resort that I'm going to go to St. Thomas. It's fine. I'll be good. You've got to. And after COVID, that's one thing we didn't talk about, but COVID stopped people from doing the joyful things in life. I told you I was sad because there's always a lot of people in my house. And even to this day, things have not returned that way because people's behaviors changed. My grandson was here every weekend, not anymore, because his routine changed. And we forget. Do you know if your grandmother or your mother's routine changed? You grew up, you finished university. What's going on with your mother right now? What's going on with your father, your uncle? They have diabetes. It's a big deal to have diabetes. This is not a simple thing. And again, in the Caribbean, it's sugar. Sugar kills. And so take good care of yourself. I didn't go to an event. I was supposed to stay in Calgary till Thursday. I made a decision. I came home last night because I was already tired. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I was supposed to be somewhere else because we're launching our Black diverse youth research project in Hamilton and Halton region. And I'm supposed to be there too this afternoon. I said, no. I'm the lead. I said, no. You have to say no. And it's okay. People have been saying no to you your whole life. Can I have this job? No. Can I do this? No. You can say no. Just make sure you know who you are. As long as you know who you are, you can get up the next day and do it again. Did I answer that?
Appreciate everything you've shared. This is my last question. How can we support and engage in the collective efforts of the Black people with disabilities so that we can, work together and try to overcome the anti-Black racism, ableism, and gender?
I think every person in here on this call, including you, Blessed, you all know the answers. How can we? We can allow for conversations about disability in our homes. We cannot use the word dunce when we talk about our children, right? Right? My Jamaican friends. We can not look at our child when they have a disability and think, and give them a nickname. We can believe that with this slight little accommodation, maybe they get a voice to text, which is, it talks for you. All those things you see on your phone, those are all accessibility functions. But and you use that when you have to write something instead of, which is what I use sometimes, instead of getting the thought of your head to be a great writer, but under the stress, can't anymore. So I use that. I suggest that you look deep into yourself first and see where you are in your journey. I say you call me, link me up on LinkedIn is easy. You can look into your own family and see, has there been any ableism, any exclusion that you didn't do it on purpose? Because the majority of people, we don't do something on purpose that we were colonized in, right? We're still trying to decolonize it. Everything that we do is through colonialism. So I suggest you look into your own families next. Look at your workplaces. If you're a hiring manager, who do you hire? Who do you promote? Same questions I ask white people. Who's in the room? And we all know who's not in the room. And And that's a reality. So if you've got a child or a sister or something that has a disability and it's a hidden secret or something you don't say proudly, I am asking you to take pride in that person and that relationship, to support that person and those people, because I know every one of you know people in your family. You know, it's not just that you have nerves, you have a clinical issue called anxiety. And those things sometimes take medication or specific types of nutritional changes to manage. We want to be healthy, we want to be strong, because the struggle is not ending today and it's not ending tomorrow. But the more of us that are stronger than, I'd say, the enemy, the more of us will win.
Wow. I don't think it could have been said better myself. I really appreciate all of your thought-provoking thoughts that you shared with us and your stories, your expertise. If you don't mind, if you could please drop your contact in the chat, especially your LinkedIn. You said that's your preferred method of contact. Yeah, so we have her email in the chat. Everyone go ahead and save the chat, and then you'll have everything, all the links that were dropped there earlier as well. Liza, I want to take the time to thank you for making time. As you said, rest is important, and you put out some no's in the last 24 hours. We appreciate that you did honor this engagement and you did prioritize this.
Of course, this is the love part. Remember the joy?
Yes, so we're so glad that you found joy in this. We definitely appreciate having you here. Thank you so much. We look to having you back in the future. And I also want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here tonight. And we're going to go ahead and close the way we often start. We're going to end this session by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors and those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stewards whose shoulders that we stand on as we share, learn, and build together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Once again, thank you for everyone tuning in, and have a great evening.
Good night, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the last day of Black History Month, the crazy month of the year. Bye.